welcome back to the housing sector. Today I have a friend of mine. I'm going to call you a friend, Jenny. Is that okay?
I think that's absolutely fine. Yes.
You can tell you're a friend because I've put a jacket on for you. A jacket and a white shirt. I don't often do
Thank
that.
you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
The first time you reached out to me, I was in the midst of all sorts of legal woes and worry and panic, and you really helped to steady the nerves and put me back on track. So thank you very much indeed for that. And then coincidentally, I reached out to you a couple of weeks ago when again I was up to my head in woes and worry, and you were there again. So and you then agreed to come on this podcast. So thank you very much indeed. For the people who don't know you, would you like to give a quick introduction?
Yep. I'm obviously Jenny, and I'm very precious about how it's spelled. It's IE, not Y. That's fundamental in my observations. So I was introduced into housing some 20 something years ago as a tenant, and I was asked by a leaflet if I'd like to join tenant participation, which I did. I'd had various repairs and maintenance issues at the time, which you'll know all about then. And I joined the participation group. Frustrating beyond belief initially. The definition of participation wasn't quite understood, I don't think. And in those days, tenant participation was a tick box exercise, I believe, by local authorities rather than a productive piece of work. So the local authority I was with had an audit inspection from the Audit Commission, which they failed miserably. I think it was 1 star with no room for improvement in the housing. And I spent a long time and spoke to a lot of people trying to find out how we could improve the service for the tenants. And I started the tenant-led process, which was, yes, probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, most frustrating things I've ever done. Lots of politics involved, etc. A lot of money involved in doing it. But we got our transfer through, and Red Kite Community Housing was set up as a consequence of that in 2011.
So you moved from a housing provider and then created Red Kite Community Housing?
Yes, that's right. Had to apply for various grants, obviously. And I led a team of really, really good volunteers and worked with some of the staff. We had a lot of battles and a lot of negativity. There was a lot, we were due to do the ballot just before local elections. So at that point, we lost all of our cross-party support as well, because obviously, and Defend Council Housing were very much in the headlines then as well. They tried to stop it. I think on the night before transfer, there was a judicial review submitted by Defend Council Housing. There's a lot of drama and a lot of risk, a lot of tears and a lot of money. But we had our celebration day and started Red Kite, which was an awesome organisation to start. All the policies and procedures were very much around the tenants and what they needed rather than being told what they needed. And our tenant volunteers were amazing. They learned how to do procurement. They got involved in everything the organisation did. And I was the chairman of the shadow board for 2 years prior to taking the homes away from the council, and chairman for 6 years as Red Kite Community Housing. And never been prouder of an organisation and its ethos. But like a lot of things, sadly, it changes. And I'm not seeing that same wonderful organisation that we set up in those days now, sadly. But yes, you have to separate yourself when you're no longer involved, I think.
Is this part of the course that small housing associations, and I know I've said this is nothing new, I've said this before, small housing associations are able to focus on the residents. They have problems that they can deal with quite quickly. And as they grow and grow and grow through mergers, usually this is where the trouble starts.
Yep, Red Kite was 6,500 homes when it was conceived. The year I retired, I retired for various different reasons, but I ceased to be a tenant the year before. But also the board and the executive team agreed that we should start developing. And I'm afraid I wasn't keen on that, because it meant the efficiencies that we were making were being sent elsewhere, developing new homes when we hadn't quite got to grips with managing the homes we had still 6 years later. And I wanted to see kind of perfection there rather than a drip-fed process. And of course, the inevitable happened. They started developing, and we were very much a local organisation. And I think one of our values was to build locally if we were going to build, and to employ locally, and to purchase locally. You know, ideology. That's what it was, really. But we build. I say we. Red Kite build outside the area now. They employ people from hundreds of miles away. The local side of it has got lost. But of course, the inevitable happened, where the efficiencies weren't enough for building. So we set timelines with our cyclical maintenance, like replacement kitchens and bathrooms. We insisted on them being 12 years and 15 years rather than 30 and 25 years. But it's my understanding they've gone back to the longevity rather than doing them in the short term, which doesn't really benefit anyone except the coffers. The tenants, once again, I do feel and I believe that take a back seat now rather than being at the forefront. Certainly what I hear. But I think that's endemic in housing, isn't it, Ben?
I think so. And there's an article today. Today is the 18th of March. I've reposted it and commented on it, and it's West Midland Homes, and they're all saying, you know, we need to come together and we need this funding so we can build 1.5 million homes, which seems to be the target that's banded around. And I think, well, when did you become house builders rather than social housing providers, and why aren't you managing your existing stock? And seems to be very much an onus now on, we're going to build a load of new homes.
Somebody said to me once, I think we were recruiting for our operations director at the time, very excited about development because it's sexy, you know. But where do the tenants come into that? The existing tenants. And that's always been my passion, the existing tenants. I think building is kind of innovative and good, but that should be done by someone else. I think the local authorities should do the building, and maybe the housing associations take over running them rather than them becoming developers. The profit in it, it's very hard these days to build homes anyway. It's very expensive. You're not going to get your money back if you let them as social housing. So they're all shared ownership or they're outright sold, and you get very small number of social housing. And it is actually social housing that we need. One of the things that Red Kite did do was set up an initiative called 2011, which doesn't seem to have got much traction actually, but I always felt that homes, we should be able to provide a different dynamic and charge less rent than social rent to people that were working, to give themselves an opportunity to save to buy outside of social housing. The rent in the area that I come from are extremely high. Even the social rents are extremely high. But that tenancy needed to be on a kind of community level tenancy. So you had your means test when you were bidding for a home, and you had a percentage of your income against the home. So it could be less than social housing. Invariably it was. But because there were community homes and you were getting a special deal, you ought to give back to the community. And my idea was always that they should do some voluntary work or something, but I think that was poo-pooed at the time. Am I allowed to say that? It was
Say whatever you
poo-pooed at
like
the
on this
time.
podcast, Jenny, whatever you like.
Thank you. Oh dear, don't give me carte blanche, Ben. That's dangerous.
No, I don't care.
But
We speak truthfully,
no,
honestly, and openly here.
no, I actually don't care either, to be fair. I've just been polite. But I think it was important that, because Red Kite was is a community, it's supposed to be a community housing association, hence the name Red Kite Community Housing, because I've always maintained that wherever there are social housing, you don't very much have council estates anymore because of the right to buy, but you are amongst a community. And as a landlord, you had a duty of care, not just to the tenant that you have on your books, but the whole community, because whatever the tenant does impacts. And however you look after the home impacts on the community. So it's really important that that community ethos is embedded. So the 2011 was kicked off. Actually, it was the year after I left, and it's a wonderful, wonderful idea. But I'm not sure that that's going all that well either. So, but you, in our introduction, you said that we met, and I think it was very early on in the pandemic, wasn't it?
Quite possibly, yeah. Yeah,
2020. So we're looking at sort of 5 years ago. And in 2019, having been out of housing for some 3 or 4 years, I think, I was invited to the housing conference in Manchester and my brief, and it was from Terry Afflett. She contacted me and asked me if I'd go and speak. And my brief was, how can we best talk to our tenants? And it was the anniversary of Grenfell. It was the 2-year anniversary of Grenfell. So the whole focus was on, tenants in that respect. And I said to her at the time, I'll come and do it with pleasure. But I am going to say this will be my 13th year in housing, and I've been having the same conversation since day one. And I'm not quite sure why we're still having this conversation. Why isn't it making a difference? Why are we still trying to learn how can we best speak to human beings?
Yeah.
Not aliens. Yeah. And it is just, it's an anathema to me. The money that's spent, the conferences that are held with the same heading, albeit phrased slightly differently, all on the same thing. How can we best talk to our tenants? It's actually not about talking to them, it's about listening to them and hearing what they say and genuinely putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
If this was my mother, if this was my daughter, if this was my dad, how would I feel? The experiences I've had where that's never taken into consideration, too many to mention.
Yeah, and I grow tired, and I know lots of people grow tired. It seems to be either full of self-gratulatory, oh, aren't we great? Pat on the back, aren't we doing brilliantly? Here was another great conference, what we learned, what we shared. Or they're pleading poverty, going, we haven't got any money, we can't do this, we can't fix repairs, and the events that, and one that I sort of managed I fell out with it was when you look at the ticket price and you think, well, hang on a minute, this is an expense that's coming out of my pocket as a resident, and it's a day out of the office. And what are you actually learning? And why isn't the Chartered Institute of Housing focused on the qualifications and being this body that does the training and qualifications? Why is it all spinning off into events? And we know why, because they charge every vendor there, and then they sell your email address to that vendor as part of the ticket fee, and everyone just has a day out of the office. There doesn't seem to be any tangible output, and there certainly isn't any tenant representation there.
No, and it's odd, isn't it? Because the way we in housing, the way that the tenant is generally treated is I think it's awful, to be fair. I really do. I mean, I used to go to Harrogate with a friend of mine that was the chairman of a tenant group in Wokingham. Maureen, she sadly passed away recently, but she was a really strong advocate for tenants. And but we used to go to Harrogate to the annual housing conference when it was held there instead of Manchester. And I went to every session, every keynote session. There were very few tenants there. It was expensive, but I learned so much of what not to do, actually.
Mhm.
And I attended many sessions with professionals, in inverted commas. And then one day, and Michelle Reed, who was the chief executive at TPAS at the time, was running a tenant session. So Maureen and I decided to go to that. When we were going to the other sessions, we were in really nice rooms, and there were tables laid out with buffet, and there was free tea and coffee, you know, copious amounts of tea and coffee. And we sat round, cabaret style, very professionally run. Oh, I don't know what I've done there, sorry. And then we went to the TPAS one, which is the only tenant one we ever went to, actually. And it was down in the basement.
Yeah.
And we were greeted at the door with a member of staff from TPAS, I believe, who gave us packed lunches in a paper bag. The packed lunches included a carton of orange juice, an apple, and a sandwich. And I can honestly tell you, I've never felt so patronised in all my life.
Yeah.
And I sat down, and we were treated like children. The participation was zero. We were really spoken to. And at the end of it, I went up to see Michelle, and she said, "Oh, did you enjoy the session?" I said, "Well, to be honest, no, I've saved you my apple because I really felt it took me back to when I was at school. So I thought I'd give you my apple to say thank you, miss." I said, I felt so patronised. I hated it very much. We did actually become friends after that, and she came to Red Kite and did a presentation to Red Kite, but I've not noticed any changes there at all.
No.
Not the treating with respect. And I think housing professionals are so used to dealing with that very tiny percent of people that behave badly. They treat everyone like they behave badly.
Yeah.
And they still decide what's best rather than asking what would be liked. I don't know if that's your experience still, but
100%. And I've said before, the makeup of the people within the homes has changed. We're not just social tenants anymore. We're better educated. We're shared ownership. There's even full ownership. We're tech savvy. We're able to correspond, and we deserve a return on the money that we're spending. We're consumers. We're customers. And many keep saying, "Oh, you're the customer. The customer's at the heart of everything we do." Then treat me like a customer.
And the customer's always right, isn't it? Aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. But you said something quite profound back then. The dynamic of the tenant is different. I don't believe it is. I think what we're finding, in some cases it is. I mean, but somebody said that to me when we were going through the transfer process. We had to knock on everybody's door, because obviously you had to go to ballot, and anyone with a secure tenancy had to vote on whether they wanted to change or not. And I was out with a member of staff, and we were knocking on people's doors, and I met some wonderful people. And I remember her saying to me in the car, now bearing in mind I was a tenant, "I am absolutely gobsmacked at how intelligent some of our tenants are," was the phrase she used. And I sat there and I thought, I'm half Italian, half Irish, so I find it quite difficult to control my emotions at times. But I sat there thinking, that is so unbelievably patronising. And I said to her, "Sue, you're sat with me, who we work together every day. I'm a tenant. I've got O-levels, A-levels, and a PhD. But you've worked on the assumption that I'm not intelligent because I'm a tenant. What you don't do is look at why people are, their circumstances. Some people are in social housing because they don't have the wherewithal to go and make themselves better. Other people are in social housing for personal circumstances, and you've got no idea. And of course they're intelligent. I would never label anyone, even, like I think, I don't know how you describe them, like the worst tenant possible, as having no intelligence. I mean, they're smart enough to be in social housing, you know, that takes some intelligence, you know.
My mate
Got on
Nick,
the housing list.
yeah, my mate Nick, who I love him to bits. He has never worked. He has worked some bits in his life, but he's basically a breeder. He's had lots of children, and I love him to bits. And he has been one of my best friends since I was 17. And if it came to a university degree in how to claim benefits, that man would have a PhD in it. He really would.
Yeah, yeah. I've got friends like that. I've also got friends that will actually openly say, I've even got friends that live in council houses. You know, I
Yeah,
mean, hooray for you.
yeah, well done.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, very well done. But you know what the sad thing is? I mean, I had my own home and then I lost my home. And I was very appreciative of the council house system because myself and my children were housed. But then I became fortunate enough to be able to buy my home, which I did, but it went against all my principles, which is why I resigned from Red Kite, because I didn't feel I could carry on with it. But I actually bought my home incredibly reluctantly because I'd been in it for 30 years and I was going to lose it because of the bedroom tax, as it was called, and also the 80% market rent. So, and I couldn't bear that insecurity.
yeah,
But it did make me realise just how precious social housing is for security
yeah,
until a government or another introduces some crazy idea and bring it in retrospectively, which I think was the biggest mistake. I could understand the policy going forward because you know then what you're dealing with, but it didn't make any sense doing it retrospectively. And I couldn't have afforded to stay here. So, and I didn't want to lose my home, and there wasn't a bungalow nearby that I could move to. I would have to move out the area. All my family are here, my job's here. I was very, very scared. So I went against all of my principles and bought my security. And to be honest with you, I thought I would always have that security,
yeah.
but it was being threatened, and that's a very scary place to be. Very scary.
Our homes are so much more than bricks and mortar, aren't they? It is that security and that sense of belonging.
Well, it's a home. You
Mm,
know, I mean, I am quite notorious for insisting that everybody refers to them as homes, not units, homes. And at board, I became a pain in a lot of people's lives because I could be presented with a 900-page report from one of the very famous what they called agents, and they would have been given a brief. Don't use the word unit in the report because our chairman doesn't like it. I can get to page 3 and my vice chairman will ring me up and saying, I'm just picturing your face at this minute. Are you reading the report? And I said, 35 times already we've got unit. And I rejected the report until it had been spell checked. It was just ridiculous. If you use the word unit, you don't see people.
no, I called out Ruth Cook on that, and I said, "Look, it might be your stock, but there are homes." And their latest turn of
Exactly.
phrase now is schemes. Schemes. Well,
Oh,
yeah, it is a
please.
scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or a scam, one or the other.
yeah.
Yeah. But
The
to be
sorry.
fair, go on.
No, you
Shall I go
continue.
on?
Yeah,
I, I, I would say, to be fair, I was the same with tenants because I would sit with many during my tenure and I would listen to complaints. Um, and one example I can give you is one of the tenants, and every meeting I'd been to, she complained about the same thing. And that was when her windows were replaced. They knocked one of her quarry tile on the windowsill and it was very loose. She'd phoned 25 times and nobody had been to fix it. So I said to her, well, I've got to say this because I feel this. 25 times is a huge amount of energy and time For you to secure that tile yourself in your home
Mm.
will give you so much more satisfaction. It will cost the company £150 at best to come and fix it for you. It will take you 2 minutes. I can even show you how to do it, but you need to start taking some pride and in your own home. It is their house, yes, absolutely agree, but it's your home.
Yeah.
So I would try and get that message across as well. So on both sides of the fence.
This leads in nicely because obviously service charge bills have all come through in the last couple of weeks, and I've been inundated with people saying, it's gone up by this amount, and it is a horrendous amount again. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. We could do a lot of this ourselves. We could hoover our own corridors. We could get a strimmer. I could buy a strimmer and we could take it in turns to trim our own bushes and bring that price down. Now, you went all the way out into sort of taking over the creating Red Kite community housing. What advice do you have for tenants? Can we take over? How difficult would it be for us to say, we're not going to pay that? Because a lot of the time we don't get it anyway. We're not going to pay that. We'll do this ourselves.
Okay, well, do you know what? I would do as much research as I could to find out whether that's possible. You will get kickback because a lot of efficiencies that housing associations make, and they're not going to be very happy about this, comes from leaseholder service
Yeah.
charges, of course. The only problem you have is lethargy. You can't do it all on your own then. You need a team, and you need a team that is going to be consistent and be helpful. There's an insurance issue with you doing it on your own, from what I believe. So you're strimming, for instance, and you hit a stone and you break the window of somebody's home, you're responsible for that. I don't know what the rules are now, but my girlfriend Maureen, who I mentioned earlier, she lived in a lovely little row of bungalows that had a communal back garden, and she was really fed up with how badly it was done. So she took it on and did it herself, and she did a beautiful job. She did it for 10 years. Nobody ever came and said thank you, or she never got any kind of reward for doing it, and didn't do it for any reason other than she wanted to look at it. And because she's now passed away, and the tenants that live there now are just so sad because it's gone back to being an
Yeah.
awful communal area. And I get why you'd want to do that. There must be something somewhere that will tell you how you can set up a leaseholder management committee, and you could do it yourselves and then have the money deducted maybe. But you'd have to, it depends on your relationship, doesn't it? I think it's an intelligent adult conversation to have, isn't it?
There
And why
is no
wouldn't you want to do that?
relationship. The relationship, they
No.
will not allow that any form of relation. In fact, they've gone, as you know, to great lengths to stop me from communicating. Saying, "Hang on a minute,"
Yes.
which
Yeah.
makes no sense
And yet,
considering.
no, but your input would be, to me, certainly, I it's valuable, the input of your residents, absolutely. I think leaseholders or tenants, they're your eyes. They're telling you what's going on the ground. And yeah, there might be a whole plethora of them that do nothing but moan all the time, but there are people that genuinely want to make things better.
Mm,
And they are the ones that should be listened to, aren't they? Because
they
you're
are.
not looking to cause trouble. You just want your home to be a decent home to live in, which is no more or less than they would expect themselves. And that's where I come from. That is, just put yourself in their shoes. What is it? Because social rent is a lot of money now, and your service charges are a lot of money. What would you expect if you were paying that? That's that, and I think they fail to do that miserably on a daily basis. You
And
know,
as housing associations become bigger, they naturally have more influence and sway over the political landscape, the world
yeah.
of social housing. And yet, if we can determine that social housing providers don't get better when they get bigger, how come we're allowing them to then influence the smaller providers and corrupt them?
That is an incredibly good question, and a question I've been asking for many years. Big isn't beautiful. You know,
Mm.
how can you own a business that's based in Preston, that's got houses in Portsmouth? How can you manage that properly and for the benefit of your tenants? And I think the sad thing is, we, as tenants or leaseholders, even when you're in that environment, doesn't matter. You're not important, and you should be incredibly important. You don't have choice. Customers have choices. You don't have choices who your landlord is. And I think that maybe should be looked at. You know, can I choose to have a different landlord?
Mm.
You know, if you keep telling me I'm a customer, where are my choices? You know, you even tell me what colour I've got to have my front door. You know, don't
Right.
give me a choice about that even. Although we did, I think that's changed quite considerably. You don't see rows and rows of houses with burgundy front doors anymore. I think people are giving more choice now. And certainly that was our ethos at Red Kite. We had 5 or 6 different kitchens, 5 or 6 different types of tiles and colours, and that tenants could choose. So when they were having something major done, they could choose the materials, and that I thought was lovely.
Yeah.
Gave people choices. And then I say it's lovely as though it's something that was special. To me, that should have been normal.
Yeah.
And I know it's cheap buying a whole boatload of burgundy paint, but you know, like burgundy, why should I have burgundy? I want my own colour. Thank you very much.
And
It's
it's
silly things, isn't it?
your home and the door that you're going to open every day. So you're the one
Yes,
who
and
sees
when
it.
when you open that door and you go in, that is your safety net. That's your
Yeah.
haven, and like everybody else treats their home that way, so do we.
Yeah.
And that's how they should see it.
No, I agree
So
completely. So
yeah,
big
it's
isn't
sad,
always
isn't it?
better.
Really?
The,
No.
the service charges keep going up. What do you think the future of social housing is? It's a big question,
Oh,
and we short time left. But what do you think the future is? Where's it going to go?
I actually think it's going backwards because the emphasis is on development and new
Yeah.
homes. It's going backwards. And I don't think actually taking away the right to buy is going to solve it either. It is a culture shift that's needed. And, you know, again, I'm going to say it's a conversation I've had for 20 years. See the value in who's living in the homes, and maybe social housing will survive and grow. But at the moment, social housing can't grow, it's too expensive.
Right.
It's too expensive to produce and to get loans for and to pay back the loans, and which is why most homes now that are being built for shared ownership or outright buy with a smidgen of social, which doesn't cut the mustard. It's
Yeah.
a lot more needed. So I don't know, Ben.
I think a lot of people. I mean, we're in shared ownership, and the fact that they're allowing the rest of the building to fall into disrepair is having that
Mm-hmm.
impact on the part that we own, and
Yeah,
is negatively impacting our end of life care, our the value that we invest. You used to invest in property because it was an investment, and
yeah,
I agree with you. But when you've
yeah.
got a landlord who's not prepared to put their bit in, you have
The
to
thing is,
worry.
the service charges, I don't know what they do with them now. There used to be a phrase um, for the service charges. It wasn't ring fencing, it was something else. But of course, they're not preserved for any repairs and maintenance. On all of your service charges won't be put in a pot ready for when your roof needs replacing or your windows. You just get a massive bill,
Yeah,
won't you?
yeah, and did yeah.
So yeah, and did indeed, yeah, and that is quite scary. But as far as maintaining it and managing it yourselves, you can trickle transfer out of an association. You'd have to look into it, but you've got to have a huge amount of energy. I have to say, when I was doing it, there were many, many times I could have just thrown in the towel. It's such hard work, and you do have so many people against it because they think they can do it better, or
Mhm.
it's theirs, it's their possession. So maybe that's changed over the years. I don't know, but
It certainly hasn't. I've been fighting it with them all since 2016 just to be heard, and have that same
Yeah.
pushback. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, I kind of got skin in the game
Why
though.
do you think they're like that? Why do you think they're like that, Ben?
It's partly the way I come at it. If anyone says, you're not doing a job well, people tend to get defensive, but the evidence is out there that they're not.
Mm,
So, and I have tried. I've knocked on the door politely. I've tried to have the conversations politely. I've tried, and
mm,
each time when I've been shut down and silenced, I've escalated, and it ended up with them
yeah.
being debated in the House of Commons. And it
Mm,
continues. There's a few things on the cards which shall tell you offline, but yeah, there's a few more things up my sleeve. Yeah, and you think, well, that's the next step that we have to go to.
yeah. Yeah. There certainly has to be something done that you're listened to and heard,
Yeah,
and actions are taken, because the mold thing I would have thought would have frightened the life out of all of them, really, because in my day I went to many homes that had mold in, and the tenants were told, this was when it was local authority, that it was lifestyle, and that
yeah,
used to really inflame me. And you'd go outside the building and you could clearly see it
yeah.
needed repointing, and the windows, all the seal around the windows had gone. It was blatantly in your face. But to accuse them of lifestyle and not opening windows and things was really disingenuous. But that was always the excuse. So it saved money.
I recorded a podcast yesterday with Dan Bruce that will go out when you're watching this. It will be last week. And he bought a luxury flat in London and has had no end of problems due to defects in the build. So
Mm,
it's the problem with the building. Jenny, we
it
we
is the
are
building.
we are
We're
running out
out
of
of
time,
time.
but it's been lovely speaking
Okay.
to you again, and I'd love to catch up and we could talk again in a couple of months' time if you're free.
Yeah, no, I would be happy to do that. And I will do a little bit more. I'll have my eyes open a little bit more locally and nationally so that I can be more up to date with what's going on. I tell you what, it frightened me, so I stayed away.
Well, we'll bless you, my darling, and thank you so much indeed for the support that you have offered me over the years, because it always
Oh,
seems to come
anytime.
just when I need it. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
No, you're welcome, Ben. You have a good day, and I will speak to you again soon. Let me
Thank you.
know what these things in the pipeline are at some point.
I will do. God bless. Bye bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Bye.